Everyone said that I was a dog around Matthew. I had taken a knife for him, risked my life for him, and obeyed his every word, but later, for a business deal, he gave me to an old man. Matthew looked at me with a mocking and contemptuous expression. Don't think I don't know what you're thinking about me. You like men, right? I'll let you have enough fun. Later, I was tortured to death by the old man, and unexpectedly, I was reborn to the year when I first met Matthew at the age of 18. Only then did I realize that all along I had mistaken my savior. Matthew sold me to an old man for a business deal. He looked down at me with a face full of disgust. Grace, just the thought of you being by my side for so many years makes me sick to my stomach. He had people throw me into the private room and then turned around and left at the moment the door closed. I smiled. Matthew, I'm sorry for pestering you for 10 years. It won't happen again. I closed my eyes and let the old man choke my neck. He was enjoying the pleasure of torturing people. I don't know how much time passed. My body was covered with all kinds of scars, and I was on the verge of death, like a broken doll. At this time, my phone rang. I knew it was Matthew calling because that was the ringtone I had specially set for Matthew. I was afraid that he wouldn't be able to find me if something happened. But I didn't have the strength to answer the phone. I was too tired. Matthew, this is the last time I'll help you. I'll give this life back to you. The old man picked up the phone full of smiles. General Manager Matthew, this one is really to my liking today. I'll make the decision on that business deal for you. We should keep in touch often. TSK, why did he hang up on me? The old man impatiently threw the phone away. He looked at me, who was barely breathing, and shouted to the bodyguards outside the door, send 2 people over to deal with this and throw her into the sea. With a loud bang, the door of the private room was kicked open violently. In a daze, I seemed to see Matthew. I didn't expect that even when I was about to die, I was still thinking about Matthew. How pathetic. Grace, aren't you good at fighting? Why didn't you resist? Why? Matthew held me and roared. Something hit my face. It was very hot. Matthew was crying. He was actually crying for me. I must be dreaming. If I could live again, I don't want to meet Matthew anymore. I'm too tired. I didn't expect that I really was reborn. I was in a daze, listening to the noisy commotion around me, and saw that I was actually in a bar. At this time, I was wearing the clothes of a bar waiter, holding a tray in my hand, and being blocked by several middle-aged men. They were making advances on me and saying filthy words. Since you're already out selling yourself, don't pretend with us. Serving us guys will be a good deal for you. Don't be ungrateful. I was distracted for a moment and was dragged by them to take me away. The disgusting touch instantly reminded me of the old man in my previous life. Let me go. I wanted to break free. But with this weak body now, I couldn't break free from the dragging of 3 adult men at all. Even worse, it aroused their greater interest. So disgusting. Kill them. Kill them. Voices in my head kept urging me. Anyway, in this world, there was nothing worth looking forward to for me. I broke free from one of their hands and reached into the pocket of my pants. There was the utility knife that I had already prepared. However, just as I grabbed the utility knife, a voice engraved deep in my memory suddenly rang out. Daring to cause trouble on the territory of the Smith family, you must be tired of living. It was Matthew, who was 20 years old. I looked at the young man not far away. The chaotic lights in the bar shone on his face, so that neither in my previous life nor now had I seen his face clearly. I only knew that he was the young master of the Smith family. But I didn't know that the Smith family actually had 2 young masters. Just like in my previous life, Matthew had people deal with those men and then gave me a sum of money as compensation. In my previous life, I took the money and kept him firmly in my heart. And I told myself, Grace, from now on, your life no longer belongs to you but to Matthew. So later, no matter how much he humiliated and abused me, I had no regrets. But now, I don't want to have anything to do with him anymore. I don't want this money. I don't want to owe him this life-saving grace either. Wait. I called out to the young man who was about to leave and walked towards him. But I was warily blocked by the bodyguards beside him. There was always a distance between him and me. At this time, the wild DJ dance music in the bar rang out. Everyone started swinging their bodies crazily. The whole bar fell into a kind of noisy frenzy. The fireworks around the dance floor exploded with a bang, making the whole bar much brighter. I looked at the face of the young man not far away and stood there in a daze. He wasn't Matthew. He just looked a bit similar to Matthew around the eyes and eyebrows. But he was better looking than Matthew. What else is there? The young man seemed dissatisfied that I had been staring at him, and his brows furrowed slightly. At this moment, my heart was pounding like thunder, and I had difficulty breathing. It turned out that all along I had mistaken my savior. The idea of paying back the money that I had originally planned was pushed down by me. I heard my voice hoarse. "What's your name?" The young man seemed hesitant. I quickly said, "I should at least know the name of my savior, so that I can pay you back later." The young man paused and was about to speak. But the bodyguard beside him spoke first. "My young master's name is Matthew." I don't know why the bodyguard lied to me. But the young man didn't refute. His body seemed a bit stiff, and a flash of self-mockery passed through his eyes. The bodyguard beside him urged again, "Second young master, you should go back now. Don't make the master angry." I was a bit startled when I heard the bodyguard's address to the young man. The Smith family is the richest in Jiangcheng. It is heard that they have only one son, Matthew. When did a second young master emerge? Moreover, having been by Matthew's side for 10 years in my previous life, I had never heard Matthew mention that he had a younger brother. In order to figure out what was going on, I used the money given by the young man to hire a private detective to investigate. But the information I got was scarce. The only thing I found out was that the Smith family indeed had more than one child, and there was a bastard named Samuel. The Smith family felt ashamed and concealed the identity of the bastard. But I always felt something was strange. It's not uncommon for a wealthy family like the Smith family to have a bastard. Why did they specifically conceal Samuel's existence? I wanted to see Samuel again. Every night after that I went to work part-time in that bar, but I never saw him again. I was a bit panicked. I was afraid that I would never see Samuel again. Until that day I was cornered by debt collectors in a dead-end alley. Samuel showed up. He was wearing a hat with the brim pulled down low. "Tisk, it's you again?" Samuel said with a look of disgust. "Another attempt to rob me of my chastity?" He flexed his fists looking quite capable of fighting, but the next second he suddenly grabbed my hand and shouted, "Run." I was dragged by Samuel and we ran frantically in the night. The debt collectors behind us were in hot pursuit. I turned my head to look at the half of Samuel's face exposed under the brim of his hat, feeling the warmth from his palm, and unconsciously clasped his hand back. My heart was pounding like thunder. I thought, let's just keep running like this, Samuel. Don't disappear again. But Samuel was too weak. He couldn't run anymore after just 5 intersections. We were blocked by the debt collectors. The bald man in the lead was so angry that he was cursing and swearing. Without a word, he threw a punch at me. Samuel stood in front of me. Fool. Actually, I'm quite good at fighting. Even though this current body is frail, in order to reach Matthew's side in my previous life, I had studied various combat techniques desperately for 10 years, climbing up step by step, heedless of my own life. After being reborn, the muscle memory doesn't disappear. I quickly dealt with those debt collectors and told them, I'll pay back the money my father owed in installments. Don't come to harass me anymore. The debt collectors nodded repeatedly and fled in panic. You're so fucking good at fighting. Why did you run? Samuel leaned against the wall, panting heavily. I looked innocent. You didn't ask me either. How much do you owe them? Samuel asked me. More than 5 million including principal and interest. I calculated. Half a year ago, right after I finished the college entrance examination, my family went bankrupt. Overnight, all of my family's assets were frozen. I was left on the streets, running around being chased by creditors. My father couldn't bear the blow and jumped off a building to commit suicide. I started working day and night to pay off the debts. The bar was just one of the places where I worked. Even though I was often harassed, it paid well, so I didn't care about being taken advantage of. But later, my mother also died. I was completely hopeless. Samuel didn't know that on the day I met him, I was actually planning to kill those bastards who often bullied me and then find a deserted place to go and be with my parents. But he helped me and he did me a favor. I had to repay him. I'll help you pay it back, Samuel said. Why? I wanted to know the reason. Samuel twitched the corner of his mouth, not looking serious at all. Because I'm kind. As soon as he finished speaking, he let out a slight hiss sound, as if he had pulled something painful. I immediately got nervous, worried that he had been affected during the fight just now. Let me see if you're hurt anywhere? Samuel turned his head away, not letting me see, but finally he couldn't resist my persistence. Only then did I see that on the other half of his face, there was a clearly visible palm print. The mark was swollen high, showing obvious purple and blue. It could be seen that the force of this slap was quite strong. I'll take you to apply some medicine. I pulled Samuel. Samuel refused to go, not caring at all. What medicine? It doesn't hurt anyway. I'm used to it. I raised my hand and pressed it on Samuel's face. Samuel yelled in pain. Are you crazy? It hurts like hell. I looked at Samuel. Didn't you say it didn't hurt? Samuel looked speechless and reluctantly followed me to the pharmacy to buy medicine. Under the bright lights, I saw Samuel's face clearly for the first time. His eyelashes were long, his nose was high, and his jaw was sharp yet refined. He was afraid of pain and sensitive. As soon as I applied the plaster on his face with my index finger, his whole face turned red with pain. I'll do it myself. Samuel wanted to snatch the plaster. I dodged. I hurt you. I'll be gentler. I reduced the force of applying the medicine. Samuel's face seemed to turn even redder, spreading all the way to his neck. Does it still hurt? I'll be even gentler. It'll be okay, soon. I coaxed carefully. Just shut up. Samuel was restless and irritable. After the medicine was applied, Samuel immediately distanced himself from me. He even held a grudge. I looked at Samuel and asked him, if I want to see you in the future, where should I go to find you? Samuel was impatient. Why are you looking for me? To repay the favor and pay back the money. I gave a superficial reason. Actually, I was just afraid that after we separated tonight, I would lose track of him again. Samuel didn't know that actually being cornered by the debt collectors in the alley tonight wasn't a coincidence. It had also happened in my previous life. At that time, he had also shown up. However, in my previous life, I had mistaken him for Matthew. Or rather, before this, I didn't even know who the person who had saved me in the alley in my previous life really was. I could only take a gamble. I really wanted to see Samuel. I was afraid that I would never see him again. Fortunately, I won the bet. This time, I wasn't knocked unconscious by the debt collectors, didn't wake up in a hospital room, and didn't mistake Matthew, who happened to be in the hospital room, for my savior again. Go to University A and you can find me. Samuel's voice was a bit muffled. He didn't know that I was also from University A, so I knew. There's only Matthew in University A, not Samuel. Samuel was stunned for a moment and asked subconsciously, how do you know my name? I hired a private detective with the money you gave me and found out. I answered honestly. Damn it. Samuel cursed and asked, what else did you find out? I shook my head. Except for the name, there was nothing. It was as if Samuel didn't exist in this world at all. Samuel seemed to breathe a sigh of relief and began to distance himself from me. I saved you just casually. I don't need you to repay any kindness. Just pretend we don't know each other from now on. After saying that, Samuel left. I followed him. Until he gradually became impatient. What on earth do you want? So where can I find you exactly? I asked stubbornly. Somehow, I always had a feeling that if I let him leave like this time, I would really never be able to find Samuel again. Believe it or not, I'll beat you up. Samuel waved his fist to threaten me. You can't beat me. I laughed. Samuel had a black line on his head and took to his heels, trying to shake me off. He seemed a bit forgetful. He simply couldn't outrun me. Samuel leaned against the wall, his chest heaving violently. I didn't know if it was because of exhaustion or anger. Fine, I'll tell you. I'm in the Smith family. Come and find me if you can. Samuel simply gave up. He seemed certain that the Smith family was heavily guarded and I couldn't get in. But in my previous life when I was with Matthew, I had been to the Smith family countless times and was already very familiar with it. Samuel, we have a long way to go. I smiled and waved my hand, watching Samuel leave. He seemed to think that I had given up. He paused for a moment, then turned around and left, his back looking a bit lonely. The next night, taking advantage of the darkness, I climbed into the Smith family and then into Samuel's room. There was no one in the room, and the sound of water dripping came from the bathroom. Samuel seemed to be taking a bath. The furnishings in his room were very simple. There was only a bed, a desk, and a computer. The computer was on, showing a string of unfinished code. There was a pile of messy scratch papers on the desktop. I picked up the scratch papers and took a look. There were calculations of the code on them, with scribbles and drawings, but it seemed that he hadn't got any clue. It could be seen that Samuel really wanted to finish writing this code. Unfortunately, it seemed that he didn't succeed. I thought that I had found a way to stay by Samuel's side. After all, in the college entrance examination in the past, I entered the ACE major of computer science in University A as the top scorer in science in the whole province. At this time, there was movement in the bathroom. I subconsciously looked over. Samuel walked out of the bathroom while drying his hair. He was bare-chested, with only a bath towel loosely wrapped around his waist. The body of a 19-year-old boy was already in the most beautiful stage of life. Moreover, he seemed to be working out. His abdominal muscles were evenly distributed and the lines were nearly perfect. I was a bit stunned. Suddenly, I heard Samuel's panicked voice, You, how did you get in here? Samuel's whole body turned red in an instant. I came to my senses and unconsciously swallowed. I said calmly, I climbed in. Samuel was dumbfounded. The security system of the Smith family was notoriously impenetrable. Samuel simply couldn't believe that I could sneak in without making a sound. But now I was standing right in front of him alive, and he had to believe it. Before they find you, leave quickly. Samuel pushed me in a flurry. I won't go. I insisted. During the pushing and shoving, we inevitably had physical contact. My hand accidentally pressed on Samuel's pectoral muscle. Samuel's body trembled almost instinctively. What are you doing? You're a rascal. He jumped 3 feet away in fright, with his hands protecting his chest, looking at me warily and angrily. But his body gave a completely different reaction. For example, his earlobes were red to the point of bleeding. And also, under the bath towel. But the only thing that came to my mind in an instant was Matthew's disgusted look in the previous life. He said I was disgusting. I was afraid that Samuel would also think I was disgusting. I pretended not to care, we're all men. Why be so sensitive? I can't take advantage of you. Samuel glared at me angrily and shamefully. He grabbed the clothes on the bed randomly and went into the bathroom. With a loud bang, he slammed the door shut. At this moment, he wasn't afraid of being discovered by others. I shook my head with a smile and looked at my burning palm. There seemed to still be the touch of the boy on it. It was lean, hot, and full of strength. Perhaps in this life there would be no chance to feel it again. I told myself over and over again, Grace, as long as you can stay by his side, that's enough. Don't be greedy. Samuel soon changed his clothes and came out. Seeing that I was still there, he glared at me and chased me away. Why haven't you left yet? I didn't say I would leave. Having lived 2 lives, it was not easy to find him. I wouldn't let go easily. I picked up the scratch papers on the table. I'm very good at computer. I can teach you. Samuel snatched the papers. I have a tutor. I don't need you to teach me. Then it seems that your tutor isn't good. He can't even teach such simple code? I said deliberately. Samuel got angry. Who said he wasn't good? He's an outstanding student from University A. Then it's you who isn't good. You. Samuel was so angry that he couldn't say a word, and his earlobes turned red again for no reason. I'm also an outstanding student from University A, and I'm in the computer science major. I can only teach better than he does. I don't know which sentence made Samuel waver, but he agreed. Samuel usually couldn't go out easily. So we agreed that every night at 10 o'clock from then on, I would sneak in to teach him. No one should know about it. And I also learned that from childhood to adulthood, Samuel had never gone to school to attend classes. He was taught by a tutor at home, and he didn't even participate in the college entrance examination a year ago. After that, every night at 10 o'clock, I would knock on Samuel's window on time. At first, he was always worried that I would be discovered. Later, I began to complain that the security system was just a fraud. After teaching Samuel for a few days, I found that the reason why Samuel couldn't write good code was simply due to his lack of basic knowledge. I started to teach him from the most basic theoretical knowledge. Samuel was very smart and learned quickly. Gradually, he was already able to write some complex programs independently. That night, I had just arrived at Samuel's room. Samuel pointed at the computer desktop and excitedly rushed towards me, shouting, "I've written it out." Such difficult code, and I actually wrote it out. He was so excited that he didn't notice the obstacle under his feet. It was expected that he would trip over. I subconsciously reached out to catch him. But I underestimated his weight. I was pushed down to the ground by Samuel, and our bodies were pressed tightly together. The weather in May had already started to get hot and stuffy, so I was only wearing a thin shirt on my upper body. And Samuel, being young and full of vitality, was only wearing a large sports vest on his upper body. His body temperature clearly transmitted to me through the thin clothes. It was scalding hot. For a moment, my mind went blank. But in the next second, the physiological reaction in my lower body instantly brought my sanity back. "Grace, you really disgust me." Matthew's disgusted expression appeared in front of me. I was in a complete panic and pushed Samuel away with a big shove. Unconsciously, I used a lot of force, and Samuel was pushed and fell to one side, looking at me in astonishment. "I'm sorry, I didn't know what to say. Should I say that I had inappropriate thoughts about him? That I was so disgusting and filthy?" At that moment, there was a knock on Samuel's door. It just gave me an excuse to leave. I hurriedly got up to leave. But the door had already been pushed open. Standing outside the door was Matthew. This was the first time I had seen Matthew since I was reborn. Due to his congenital heart disease, he was much thinner than Samuel. When he saw me, he seemed to be stunned for a moment, and there was some emotion that he couldn't hide in his tone. "Grace." If I remembered correctly, I had already avoided that point in the hospital, and at this time, I shouldn't have known Matthew. "Do you know him?" Samuel asked me, seeming a bit angry. I shook my head. "No, I don't." "Do I hate Matthew?" "Actually, not really. After all, in my previous life, I had mistaken him for someone else and pestered him for 10 years unilaterally. If anyone should hate, it should be Matthew who hates me. After all, I had made him so disgusted." Matthew faced me and pulled out a stiff smile. "Actually, we've met before, it's just that you don't remember." "Maybe. But I didn't care anymore." "Why are you here?" Matthew asked me. From beginning to end, his eyes were fixed on me. "He's the tutor I invited. Please, don't tell anyone." Samuel stood in front of me to protect me. It could be seen that he was very afraid of Matthew. Or rather, he was very afraid that I would be discovered by others. "Since you know it will get others into trouble, you shouldn't have brought her back." Matthew looked coldly at Samuel with undisguised disgust in his eyes. Samuel lowered his head and didn't say a word. Matthew stepped forward and grabbed me, preparing to take me away. I broke free from Matthew. I was the one who insisted on coming to see Samuel. "It has nothing to do with him." In an instant, the color on Matthew's face completely faded away. In the end, I still left with Matthew. Because the commotion in the room was too big, it attracted the servants of the Smith family. Only by following Matthew could I prevent Samuel from being in a difficult situation. On the way, Matthew looked at me with a sarcastic expression. Do you know that he's just an illegitimate son of the Smith family? I didn't care, so what? Matthew was stunned for a moment, as if he hadn't expected me to have such a reaction. It seemed that I had angered him, and he told me about Samuel's background. Samuel's mother, Seraphina, was once a servant of the Smith family. But when Mrs. Smith was pregnant with Matthew, she seduced the general manager of the Smith family and gave birth to Samuel, which almost caused Matthew's parents to get divorced. Later, Seraphina died in a car accident unexpectedly, and Samuel was then brought into the Smith family. The Smith family had always regarded him as a disgrace, so they had never admitted his identity in public, and they even didn't allow him to step out of the door. Once when Samuel was still young and naive, he would often sneak out to play and even made a good friend. Later, this good friend was discovered by the Smith family, and the whole family was forced to have no way out and left Jiangcheng and never came back. Since then, Samuel had learned to be obedient. Matthew was full of contempt. A bastard born of a slut will only get you into trouble. Do you really still want to be involved with him? All along, Matthew had been a person who would never give up until he achieved his goal. He was trying every way to keep me away from Samuel. Although I didn't know why he was like this, I still answered him, I don't care. I didn't care about his status as an illegitimate son. I didn't care about being implicated by him. I just wanted to stay by his side. In the following few days, I found that the security of the Smith family had been upgraded, and I could no longer sneak in as quietly as before. I could only stand outside the gate of the Smith family and look at the light in Samuel's room from a distance. I would leave only after seeing the light in his room go out. I didn't expect to see Samuel downstairs in my dormitory. He was wearing a large black short-sleeved shirt and a baseball cap, with the brim of the cap pressed down low as usual, just standing under the camphor tree downstairs in my dormitory, shrouded in a patch of shadow. At first, I didn't see him. It was really too dark, and he was hiding too well. It was when I passed near him that I smelled the scent on him. I didn't know how to describe that smell. I had only smelled it on Samuel. It was unique and had an inexplicable attraction. I stopped in my tracks and looked at the figure and called out, Samuel. Samuel's body trembled a bit, but he didn't say anything. I walked up to him and said, Why are you here? Are you going to abandon me too? Samuel's voice was a bit hoarse. How could I? I denied without hesitation. Then why didn't you come to find me? Samuel looked up at me. His beautiful eyes were bloodshot and seemed to be glistening with a few tears. I explained, the security of the Smith family has been upgraded. I couldn't get in. I could only stay at the gate every night. Did you really come to look for me every day? Samuel's eyes lit up instantly. I nodded. Kids are so easy to coax. He was already okay, without even being coaxed properly. Samuel had sneaked out again this time. He told me that he had already found a way to decipher the security system of the Smith family, which could make the security system stop working for a period of time every day without being detected, long enough for me to sneak into the Smith family. I'll wait for you tomorrow night. Okay. We made an agreement. However, the next night, the security system of the Smith family didn't go on strike. Samuel was gone. I searched everywhere but couldn't find him. I panicked. At the last moment, I thought of Matthew. He must know where Samuel was. I burst into Matthew's dormitory. Matthew wasn't there, but his roommate was. Where's Matthew? Where is he? I asked his roommate anxiously. His roommate looked at me warily and said, Who are you? What do you want with him? I didn't have time to explain. I grabbed his collar and demanded, I'll ask you one more time. Where is he? Matthew's roommate was scared by me and stammered, he had a heart attack and went to the hospital. My mind went blank with a boom. I suddenly remembered that in my past life, Matthew had a heart transplant surgery in this very year. And the person who provided the heart for him was Samuel. I rushed to the hospital built by the Smith family like a madman. I would never let Samuel die, even if it cost me my life. There were bodyguards guarding the entrance of the hospital. They stopped me from going in. I punched one of the bodyguards hard, knocking him unconscious. I was glad that in this life, with Samuel's help in advance to pay off my debts, I didn't have to live a life like in my past life where I worked everywhere but still couldn't get enough to eat. My body wasn't that frail either, and I even had the energy to exercise and box every day. So I wasn't completely helpless when facing these bodyguards. Obviously, the bodyguards didn't expect that I would dare to barge in, let alone that I would dare to fight back. They warned me that this was the territory of the Smith family and asked if I wanted to die for causing trouble here. Give Samuel back to me. I wasn't afraid at all. When they learned the purpose of my coming, they immediately became vigilant and launched an attack on me. I clenched my fists and aimed at their vital parts with every move. At this moment, I was extremely grateful for all the efforts I had made in my past life to stay by Matthew's side. These bodyguards were no match for me, but there were many of them, so I didn't have much of an advantage either. I wiped the blood from the corner of my mouth and forced my way forward as they retreated step by step. Grace. Matthew's voice came from behind the bodyguards. He was wearing a hospital gown, his face pale and bloodless, but his emotions were highly agitated. You've come back too, right? Matthew walked up to me, ignoring the bodyguard's obstruction. I questioned him, where's Samuel? Matthew's already pale face turned even paler. He couldn't believe it and said with difficulty, so you didn't come to find me, but that bastard? He's not a bastard. I ignored Matthew. I had to find Samuel. He's already dead. Matthew's voice came, hitting my heart hard. There was a cruel smile on his face as he pointed to his own heart and said, his heart is right here. Are you going to kill me for him? Beast. I punched Matthew hard in the face. Matthew didn't dodge, and blood oozed from the corner of his mouth. He wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth casually and stared at me. I knew you wouldn't have the heart to kill me, Grace. You have me here. He pointed to my heart. All right, I'm tired. Take me back to my ward. Matthew reached out, asking me to help him back. I silently held his arm and sent him back to the ward. I didn't believe that Samuel was dead. Even if he was dead, I would take his body away. He wanted to leave the Smith family. Whether he was alive or dead, I would take him away. At this time, a doctor walked into the ward and said, young master, the surgery is already prepared. I'll take you to the operating room now. Before he could finish his sentence, the utility knife in my hand was already pressed against Matthew's neck. Take me to find Samuel. You won't kill me. Matthew's tone was certain. I increased the pressure in my hand, and a bloody mark was cut on Matthew's neck, with blood flowing down. The doctor was terrified. He was afraid that if I really killed Matthew, he would get into trouble too. So he quickly said, he's in the operating room. Please let the young master go quickly. I dropped Matthew and left in a hurry. I didn't see the shock and regret on Matthew's face behind me. I took the unconscious Samuel and left the hospital. He had been given anesthesia and didn't wake up until 10 hours later. I cooked porridge and fed it to him and told him about what had happened in the hospital. Thank you for saving me. Samuel's expression was calm. It seemed that he had expected the heart replacement thing long ago. He had always known that no one in the Smith family liked him. Even if he died, no one would care. Sorry for getting you involved. Samuel's eyelashes trembled slightly, looking like a fragile doll on the verge of breaking. If we offended the Smith family, we might have no way out. But I don't care at all about being implicated. I'm someone who has already died once. Every extra day of life is a bonus. Moreover, in this life, I've met Samuel. I'm already very satisfied. The only thing I have to do is to help Samuel survive. At this moment, my cell phone rang. It was the private detective I had hired before. He said he felt really embarrassed that I had given him so much money, but he hadn't found out anything. However, now I've found out quite a lot of things. I've sent you the recording. Listen to it yourself. The private detective sent me a recording file. He also found out about the accident in which Samuel's mother, Serafina, died. So he pulled some strings and went to the prison to find the truck driver who had hit and killed Serafina. Unexpectedly, he uncovered a huge scandal. It turned out that back then, Serafina had never seduced General Manager Matthew. It was General Manager Matthew who was attracted by Serafina's beauty and had always wanted to possess her but failed. Mrs. Smith got to know about this. At that time, Mrs. Smith's family of her maiden name had already declined, while General Manager Matthew's business was booming. She knew that the husband who had married her through an arranged marriage had never loved her. To prevent him from fooling around outside, Mrs. Smith drugged Serafina and sent her to her husband's bed. She didn't expect that Serafina would get pregnant. What's more, her own child was diagnosed with congenital heart disease right after being born. In order to get a perfect heart for Matthew, she tacitly allowed Serafina to give birth to Samuel. Then, she hired someone to kill Serafina and imprisoned Samuel. Finally, she sent the truck driver who had hit and killed Serafina to prison. In this way, she successfully maintained her marriage and also made plans for Matthew's life in the future. In this whole affair, the only ones who got hurt were Samuel and his mother. After listening to the whole recording, Samuel burst into loud sobs, as if he wanted to cry out all the grievances of the past 10+ years. I gently patted his back to comfort him. When he was tired from crying, he fell into a deep sleep. I posted the recording online. This was the only way to save Samuel's life. As I expected, this incident soon caused a huge stir throughout Jiangcheng. General Manager Matthew was indeed a man who had experienced many ups and downs in the business world. Immediately, he distanced himself from Mrs. Smith, announced that they had already divorced long ago, and said that the police should handle it according to the law. Then, he came to find me. In the office, General Manager Matthew was sitting on the boss chair, his gaze sweeping over me casually, with a strong sense of oppression. What do you want? I only want Samuel to survive. I looked back at him. He paused for a few seconds and then smiled calmly. You're quite gutsy. You've succeeded. Moreover, in the future, the Smith family will only have Samuel as their son. He gave up on Matthew so unhesitatingly. But it has nothing to do with me. I only know that Samuel is finally free. I accompanied Samuel to visit his mother. Serafina's grave was small and was randomly buried in a remote cemetery, overgrown with weeds. Samuel crouched on the ground and slowly pulled out the weeds. It took him a long time to clean it up. Then he knelt in front of the grave for a long time. I knelt beside him. Do you know? Actually, in the past, I hated her, Samuel said slowly, his voice choked. I hated her for ruining other people's families, for leaving me behind, for making my life so miserable. But clearly, she was the one who was most wronged. Samuel hugged his mother's gravestone and kept crying until he was tired from crying. He said, I want to move my mom to a new place. It's too cold here. She definitely wouldn't like it. I nodded that we chose a sunny day and together moved Serafina's grave to a place with sunshine and flowers. Samuel introduced me to Serafina. Mom, this is Grace, a very important person to me. I said earnestly, Auntie, don't worry. I'll take good care of him in the future. Samuel, who had completely broken free from the imprisonment of the Smith family, chose to repeat his senior year of high school to take the entrance exam for the computer science major at University A. He didn't want to live in the Smith family and moved out on his own. I started tutoring him in his high school courses. He was really good. His comprehensive scores on previous college entrance examination papers could all reach over 700 points. If it weren't for being imprisoned by the Smith family, he should have been admitted to University A as the top science student in the province a year ago and become my senior. On this day, on my way to find Samuel, I ran into Matthew. He had lost a lot of weight and looked really haggard. Grace, are you going to abandon me too? He looked up at me, his eyes filled with tiny teardrops. He looked a lot like Samuel. But he wasn't Samuel. I'm sorry, Matthew. I mistook you for someone else at the beginning. I looked at Matthew apologetically. If I hadn't mistaken him for someone else, I would never have had any interaction with him. Matthew instantly lost control and grabbed my arm. It was you who provoked me first. It was you who provoked me. How can you just say you mistook me and then abandon me like this? I pushed Matthew away. I can give you any compensation you want. I have something else to do and I'll be late. I was in a hurry to leave. If I was late, Samuel would definitely be angry again. I'm going to die, Grace. Matthew held onto me tightly, full of pleading, please, stay with me. His heart transplant operation couldn't be done and he probably didn't have much time left. But I really was going to be late. Sorry. I refused him. Matthew still wouldn't give up and threatened me. You don't want Samuel to know what you're thinking about him, do you? I stopped in my tracks. Matthew thought his threat had worked. Grace, I don't mind how disgusting you are. Stay by my side. But I stopped only because I saw Samuel not far away. He seemed to have heard Matthew's words and was looking at me coldly. I hurriedly pushed Matthew away and chased after Samuel. Samuel, it's not what you think. I was flustered and wanted to explain. Don't listen to Matthew's nonsense. We're both men. What could I be thinking? Oh. Samuel's tone was cold as he walked forward with his head down. I could only follow him silently. Fortunately, Samuel wasn't angry enough to drive me away, yet he even asked me to live with him so that I could tutor him better in his studies. I smiled wryly. This kid really wasn't afraid of inviting a wolf into the house. But I was. I was afraid that if I spent day and night with him, he would notice something amiss. I was afraid that he would find me disgusting just like Matthew did. I refused. But in the following days, Samuel often called me for help. Either he accidentally bumped himself or fell down, and he even almost got electrocuted once. I'm sorry. I'm just so clumsy. Samuel looked at me pitifully. He was a young master who had been taken care of by others every day. It was normal for him to have no experience in independent living. Reluctantly, I had to agree to move out and live with Samuel. I was afraid that if things continued like this, he might really get himself into serious trouble. The place where Samuel lived was a large flat. Usually, except for the occasional cleaner who came to clean, there was no one else. After I moved in, I automatically took on the responsibility of cooking. Samuel would help with the dishes. Days passed by peacefully. Gradually, I put away my worries. I thought, it was good like this, until the day Samuel was admitted to university. He took a bottle of wine and said he wanted to celebrate properly. I prepared some dishes to go with the wine. We sat by the window, drinking wine and chatting. Unconsciously, Samuel got a bit drunk and leaned on me like a limp rag. Even though we had been together for nearly a year, I still couldn't handle physical contact with Samuel naturally. Instead, due to the long-term suppression and the effect of alcohol, I became more sensitive to his body. I pushed Samuel away quickly as if I had been electrocuted and slapped myself hard, scolding myself for being a brute. Afraid that he would catch a cold, I picked up a blanket and covered him with it, preparing to leave and take a cold shower. But Samuel grabbed me. He looked at me with red eyes, full of grievance. Grace, do you dislike me? No, I averted my gaze from Samuel, not daring to look at him. He had no idea how alluring he looked at the moment. Look at me. Samuel cupped my face with both hands, forcing me to look at him. The scalding touch spread from his hands to my face. The reaction in my lower body was almost uncontrollable. Then why are you always avoiding me? Why do you dislike me touching you, dislike the food I've eaten, dislike the things I've used, and still say you don't dislike me? You're a big liar. I smiled wryly and didn't say a word. How could Samuel know that it wasn't dislike, but that I didn't dare? You're not talking. You do dislike me. Samuel started crying pitifully. I really didn't expect that Samuel would be like this when drunk. Don't cry. I don't dislike you, I tried to comfort him in a flurry. Samuel cried even harder. You won't even wipe my tears for me. I'll wipe them for you. Don't cry. I quickly wiped Samuel's tears. The tingling sensation on my fingertips spread throughout my body instantly, making me tremble uncontrollably. I should be glad that Samuel wasn't sober at the moment. Otherwise, he would surely notice my abnormality. I really couldn't hold on any longer. Kiss me, Samuel said again. My body stiffened all of a sudden, and I stared blankly at Samuel. The next second, Samuel suddenly leaned in to kiss me. I quickly reached out my hand to block. Samuel, do you know what you're doing? In Samuel's eyes, there was complete clarity. Yes. He grabbed my hand and moved it away, then kissed my lips, exploring randomly. At this moment, I couldn't hold back anymore. I grabbed Samuel's head, reversing the situation. Samuel, don't regret it. The rain was pouring down outside the window. Inside the house, the tides rose and fell, as if it would never end. From now on, I won't let go.